Hi, my name is Aaron, and I am here with Andrew Bustamante to talk about human trafficking.
Hey Aaron, how are you, man?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate talking about talking about something like human trafficking because it reminds me of my old life, and it's also one of those gaps in the world that doesn't get enough attention. It doesn't get enough funding. It doesn't get enough attention, and frankly, I don't think people realize how big the problem is. So it was exciting for me to get your invitation to have this conversation to shed some light on the mystery that is human trafficking.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I mean, I know you're halfway around the world right now, and things are kind of crazy, and being able to talk to anybody is pretty nice these days.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you for the video chat, and thank you for everybody out there who invented video chat because it's getting its time in the spotlight right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right, down to business. So, you being who you are and having your prior work experience, what is your exposure to? I guess first we should start with the definition. So, what I think of as human trafficking, um, based on my own personal experience, I think of human trafficking pretty quickly as only the sexual trafficking bit, but I know that there's a much broader picture out there. Um, there's a lot of forced labor trafficking as well, and trafficking is generally defined as using coercion or fraud or some other manipulative means to force someone into undesirable labor or conditions.
Yeah,
Uh,
some kind of physical act. Yeah, exactly. So human trafficking is basically the business process of moving people as a product. And that, I mean, that when you think of it in those terms, those simple terms, people are not intended to be a product or a service of some other human being. I
no,
feel like in the United States, that's especially something that we hold true. We value our freedom, we value our liberty, we value our dignity. And when someone takes those things away from you, whatever that condition is, essentially that is human trafficking. And like you said, the example that usually jumps to mind is sex trafficking.
hmm
When people are trafficking women or children, it also happens to men, but when human beings are trafficked for a sex business. But there's also human trafficking that supports drug trade. There's human trafficking that supports forced labor. There's even modern day slavery where humans are trafficked from one country or one province to another country or another province to basically take on menial, dangerous, hazardous physical labor
right.
that that is better or that the host country thinks is too dangerous for their own natives. So human trafficking is very broad, it's very complex, and it happens all over the world.
Did you have any experience, at least witnessing it, or that you can speak to?
Oh
Um,
yeah. So if anybody who's traveled and lived abroad has seen human trafficking,
okay.
in the United States, we have a massive human trafficking problem in the sex trade that is largely unknown to people. There are women trafficked in and out from third world countries and even from neighboring countries in Latin America, and they come to the United States under forced conditions, under manipulative conditions, and then they take up work in some sort of sexual trade. In the rest of the world, the same thing happens, but it's not nearly as secret. It's not nearly as hidden.
Interesting.
Oftentimes, there are government officials or there are business tycoons that are backing it. So even when you're talking about first world countries in Europe or in Asia or in the Middle East, human trafficking is alive and well. Prostitution, organized crime, drug trafficking is all very clear and present. But what it's lacking oftentimes is the danger piece. It doesn't affect national security interests
Hmm.
immediately, not like terrorism, right? And because it doesn't have that instantaneous, that visceral threat, that's why it doesn't get the attention or the funding or the headline space that it deserves.
I think you might be onto something there, as far as the reaction part. Uh, as I'm sure you probably ran across during your time at CIA and whatnot, that funding in the United States, at least as far as federal government is concerned, and definitely down to the state and local level, is not there to combat any level of human trafficking. A lot of officers that have spoken to local law enforcement, they they often go off on their days off and take their own personal time to follow up on cases, follow up on people, try to make sure that people that they have either rescued are doing better and get the resources they need to kind of get back into a normal life, or track down and gather evidence for people, and that's all on their own dime. And
Yeah, exactly right. It's because human trafficking falls into a kind of a gap, a dead end, if you will, when it comes to jurisdiction and authorities and funding. So it's a law enforcement problem, because police officers need to enforce the law. When we're talking specifically about the United States, when human trafficking breaks the law, then it's a law enforcement problem. But oftentimes what human trafficking is used to support is actually international malicious activity, international issues, which becomes an international intelligence problem. So you've got these two different types of problems that fall under the same act. So then who gets the funds? Who gets primacy over the case? Law enforcement wants to close a case. Intelligence wants to keep a case alive. So you've got these two conflicting challenges. Do we arrest the trafficker and kill the network, shut down the network, or do we let the trafficker run so that we can find the next higher target? And these are some of the challenges that exist at the federal level before we even involve state governments. When you start involving state governments and state institutions and local police forces and different municipalities, it gets infinitely more complicated. And oftentimes the way to avoid the complication is just to not fund anyone and allow the problem to just persist, because it's a low-level problem compared to something larger like, international organized crime or terrorism or national conflict.
And then the government or whatever governing body it is that's fighting that issue can wait until that problem kind of elevates to a point where it's at a jurisdiction where they can take over and they can affect change. Wow.
Yeah, exactly right. So the reason I think all that's important is because it takes a very special kind of individual, someone like you, who's taking the fight personally and trying to take independent action to solve it. There are small nonprofits out there. There are non-government organizations out there. There are offshoots, kind of splinter organizations that come off of mainstream organizations to try to combat human trafficking. And you find them with the United Nations, and you find them with all sorts of regional specific nonprofits and non-government organizations. So I really respect what you're trying to do, because you're trying to raise awareness and you're trying to insert yourself into the fight when so many people are trying to take themselves out of the fight. So that's a big part of the reason why I'm here, and a big part of the reason why I really want to support what you're doing.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I shamelessly plug in that I am making this transition in large part due to the training that I've gotten from EDS. I'm very humbled about that, and I the lessons that I've learned have definitely keyed me up to be in a good spot to be more equipped to help out, and that's been a really cool journey to be on. So
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I mean, that's the mission of Everyday Spies, is to not only equip people like you to make an individual change, especially using an intelligence skill, but really just to solve everyday problems. And human trafficking is a huge everyday problem. It's so much of it happens in secret. So much of it happens in the shadows. Sometimes we forget just how big of a problem it is.
Right.
So Aaron, why do you want to fight this? Why do you want to get involved and take on this beast that so few people are willing to take on?
I want to make a difference. As blasé as that sounds, I want to make a difference. And I have been doing link analysis type work for a long time now. And through the EDS stuff, I've been able to realize how easily applicable it can be to other areas that interest me. And I'm a father. I have 2 young kids, similar to yourself, and it is a pull like no other when you see somebody else in trouble that you need to help them, especially a younger person. I'm getting a little choked up now, actually, just thinking about it.
It's a calling, man. It's a calling that I understand well. When you hear the voice of injustice, and you get tired of hearing it, and all of a sudden you want to start shouting back.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be, man. It's stressful, and I don't envy the work that you have ahead of you, but I am very happy to be part of it.
Thank you.